Chapter 6, Fizzy Bottom. You'll have to forgive no doll here today because I haven't finished making him, but I have got his hat on. Fizzy Bottom, said TG incredulously. Where on earth is that? Anyway, haven't we just left a Fizzy Bottom behind? The warriors looked puzzled. Then the penny dropped and they all laughed. Poking him good-humouredly in the ribs, Saffron giggled, "Oh, you are naughty, TG." Out of the tunnel bounced the unmistakable sound of gunfire, along with honky-tonk music, reminding TG of saloon bars in the old westerns. Pinned on the wall behind them, he saw a wanted poster, all faded and yellow with brown wrinkly edges. Placing the cowboy hat on the back of his head, TG walked around behind the bench to get a better look at it. As he read it, his eyes became as big as saucers. Wanted by Billy the Burp, Terry Grant, otherwise known as TG, £100 reward. What does this mean? Stammered TG. Who's Billy the Burp and what does he want with me? Echoing out of the tunnel raced the clatter of galloping hooves and the rattle of wooden wheels. TG turned round to see a stagecoach thundering towards them. 6 magnificent brown and white horses came to a halt and stood pawing the ground, snorting. TG loved horses. Giving a cry of delight, he went over to pat them. "Not so fast," drawled the driver, speaking through a dirty-looking handkerchief that masked his mouth. Tipping his hat at TG, he pulled a gun from his holster and pointed it at him. "Howdy, TG. You're coming with me." He motioned with the gun to the seat beside him on the stagecoach. Shaking, TG clambered up beside him and looked imploringly down at the warriors. The driver waved his gun at them. "You people can ride inside. Don't try any funny business, or the boy will get it." They all piled in. "Don't worry, TG," yelled Scarlet as she slammed the door behind her. "Just make good choices and you'll be okay." The driver whipped the horses' rumps with the reins and they sprang into action, galloping full speed towards Fizzy Bottom. Good choices, make good choices, bumped through TG's mind as the horses clattered down the dark tunnel. He was being thrown about as the stagecoach launched first one way and then another. His first good choice was going to be to hold on to the seat as hard as he could, or he was sure to fall off. The second was to try and pull his sweatshirt up over his mouth before he choked to death with all the dust. "Whoa!" screamed the man in the mask. TG risked picking up at the driver through a slit in his shut eyes. He was pulling hard on the rein so the horses would slow to a trot. As the dust started to clear, TG realised that there was a light coming towards them. With it came a dry, hot blast of heat. They emerged from the tunnel so quickly that TG was almost blinded by the glare of the blazing hot sun. He had to put up his hand to shield his eyes. Then he remembered the cowboy hat he'd put on earlier. It had fallen off his head and was dangling down his back. He pulled it back up and tilted it over his face. The trail they were following was deeply rutted, so the coach was still bumping up and down. TG had to hold on to his hat to stop it falling off. In the distance he could see some buildings. It looked just like an old Wild West town, with one rather odd exception. Towering above what looked like a saloon bar was a big chimney with multicoloured bubbles floating out of it. A cart rattled by, laden with sacks of corn and barrels full of apples and potatoes. It was pulled by an ancient grizzled mule, and at the reins was an old lady wearing a floral print dress and a large floppy straw hat. She looked just like Granny Genome, but it couldn't be, could it? The lady waved and shouted, "Hi, TG! Be careful!" At the mention of his name, everyone in the street stopped and turned their heads in his direction. What was going on? TG was roughly shaken from his thoughts by a dig in the ribs with a gun. Jump down now and mind you stay put, growled the masked man. TG did as he was told. He fell to the ground with a thud, hitting his knees hard on the uneven surface. Pain seared through him, bringing tears to his eyes. When he looked up, he saw with horror that the warriors were standing to one side with their hands tied behind their backs and gags around their mouths. "Hey, let them go!" TG yelled at the masked man. "Do as you're told and they'll be just fine," the man snarled. TG looked imploringly at the warriors. They were trying to say something, but all they could do was grunt. Scarlet was wriggling about and squeaking, "Are they good deuces?" Her eyes were popping out of her head as she meaningfully nodded her head at TG. What was she trying to say? There was another poke in his ribs as TG was pushed towards the sidewalk. He stepped up and found himself standing outside some swing doors. He could hear laughter and honky-tonk music coming from inside. A bubble floated down in front of him, twinkling as it caught the light. He watched it gently sink to the ground and burst, leaving a wet ring on the sidewalk. Another shove sent him flying in through the doors, where he lost his footing, sprawling across the floor. The laughter and music stopped. Everyone in the room stared hard at TG, then went on with what they were doing as if he wasn't there. TG pulled himself to his feet and looked about. He was inside a big saloon bar. Scattered around the room were small round wooden tables with chairs set about them. At one table a group of men were drinking from little tumblers as they played cards and burped. Behind them was a massive open brick fireplace, but instead of a fire, wooden planks straddled from side to side, forming a series of shelves upon which stood rows of barrels. Wiggly glass pipes sprouted from them, displaying brightly coloured liquids bubbling and fizzing away. They were linked by one large glass pipe, where multicoloured bubbles floated up, and out of sight. A loud voice rang out from somewhere above his head. "Welcome to Fizzy Bottom's Bubble Saloon Bar, TG." He looked up, and stomping down a winding wooden staircase he saw a pair of heavy black leather boots attached to a girl with tousled yellow hair that tumbled down her back. A man's brown jacket hung loosely round her shoulders over a dirty white shirt and tan buckskin trousers. Her eyes darted about the room wildly as she clumped her way towards TG. "So, TG boy, they got you, did they? About time too. Billy's fed up of waiting for you. My name's Wild Jill Hiccup, sidekick to Billy the Burp. Billy's the leader of the Fizzy Bottom Burp Gang." She threw her head back and let out an enormous throaty hiccup. "Just you sit tight till Billy gets here, Goldilocks." At the sound of his hated nickname, Goldilocks, TG could feel the familiar tingling in his ears starting, and his fists clenched tightly. Would he ever be able to get away from bullies? Without a thought, he jumped out of his seat and flew at Wild Jill.